Brandon Woodruff is going back under the knife. Sal Frelick's on the IL, but at the same time, the Brewers are anticipating some returns from a couple of other key pieces. Meanwhile, on the baseball field, they continue to play well despite not really giving their best performances over the last week. And perhaps the biggest story of the week is the return of third base Joey Ortiz. We'll recap all of that and more on this week's edition of the Brewer Fanatic Podcast. We are your hosts, Jack Stern, Spencer Michaelis. Spencer, it's been a busy week of baseball. How are you enjoying it?
I'm enjoying it. It was I'll take a 5-in-1 week anytime, of course, and a lot of baseball to watch. A lot of draft stuff still going on. That's keeping me busy as the signings come in and all that fun stuff. So yeah, it's busy, but it's been fun. How are you doing? You don't need to tell everyone exactly how you golfed, but did you enjoy golfing today?
I did enjoy golfing.
Okay,
It took a couple beers before I started to enjoy golfing, but I enjoyed golfing.
That's fair.
I'm sure everybody saw the pictures.
Well, I highlighted one of them.
That's why I'm sure everybody saw the pictures. Like I said, just wait till we get to Pud Galvin, though. There's going to be some very good action shots from that.
Are you gonna? If you're at first, I need a stretch of some sort. I need a picture.
We have a picture from last year of me stretching.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna need you.
We got an out because I stretched last year. I'm saving runs over there.
Attaboy. Attaboy. Limber. Very limber.
Yeah, it's like max extension for me. I'm not saying that's good extension because I'm probably not as flexible as I should be, but I in a field of, late 30s and 40 somethings, I may have one of the best stride lengths at first base on the roster.
There you go. Something to hang your hat on.
It is. We'll have to check my defensive runs saved at first base at the end of the year, but don't check my golf score because that's not going to be good. I can tell you that much.
That's fair. It would not be for me either. It has been quite a while since I've been on a true, I haven't played 18 holes in quite a while now that I think about it. So yeah, it'd be a rough showing if I went out there right now.
Oh, we didn't play 18. We played 9 today.
It wouldn't matter. 9, 18. My score might look like I played 18 if I played 9. So maybe that says enough.
Okay. Well, that's enough golf talk. This is a baseball podcast, and we'll get right into the details here. We'll get the negative news out of the way right at the onset of the show this week. This was not surprising news by any stretch of the imagination. We talked about this last week. Not really wanting to speculate too much, but all signs were pointing to Brandon Woodruff's shoulder was done again. And he did hold a press conference to confirm that that was the case. He talked to the media over the weekend. Pat Murphy had teased that there was an announcement coming from Woodruff, and they wanted to give him the opportunity to share the news himself. Murphy framed it very ominously, so Brandon Woodruff actually spoke to us a day earlier than he was originally planning to, and right off the bat made it very clear that he thought it sounded as though he was going to be having a funeral, and that was not the case. He also said that it kind of sounded as if he was going to be announcing retirement. That also was not the case. That surprised me a little bit, but the actual news itself as to what's going on with his shoulder is not surprising. It's the exact same problem as last time. It's the anterior capsule. He needs another surgery to get it repaired, which means he is staring down the exact same rehab recovery timeline, all of that stuff that he had just a couple of years ago. Obviously, that is not good news on its own. It's especially bad news because he already had one of these, and after the first surgery, it did not hold up for very long at all before the same problem happened a second time. On that note, he's getting this surgery performed by a different doctor. Keith Meister performed the previous surgery. This procedure, according to the Brewers, at this point, the plan is for it to be performed by Dr. Eric Bowman at some point in August. We don't know for sure why they switched doctors, but probably something to note here now that he's dealing with this a second time. Woodruff did say that right now his intention is to go under the knife, do the rehab, do the whole 9 yards again, with the plan of pitching again in big league games. We'll kind of cross that bridge when we get there as he goes through the entire process. But we do need to note right off the bat, when he had this the first time, we were pretty pessimistic about his odds of coming back. I think health wise, he ultimately did not end up beating our expectations for what the Brewers are going to get out of him. In fact, he actually ended up a little bit lower than that because we've talked about this before, like the innings numbers that we had talked about as he was working his way back. He ended up lower than those innings numbers even, and I thought we were being pretty measured with that. But he did beat our expectations for how he performed when he was on the mound, and that's very important to note as well. Now he is undergoing this a second time. As far as I know, nobody has come back from this a second time. The closest comp is Johan Santana a little over a decade ago. And when he had this second surgery, eerily similar timeline to Woodruff. I believe they were maybe a little bit further apart, and I think he threw more innings in between the two than Woodruff did. But when he had the second one, that was basically it. So if there's anybody who is going to attack this with everything he's got, it is Brandon Woodruff. But the odds were already not in his favor the first time. They are even more stacked against him to a much greater extreme the second time around. So unfortunate news, obviously, for a guy who has given everything he can give to this organization. And just as a person, you want to see him be able to work through this and work his way back. But the harsh reality is he is going to, at least for now, try to do something that no pitcher has done before at the big league level.
Yeah, and like you said, you don't want to put it past him. You can't put it past him. He's shown that he can do some pretty incredible things despite coming off an injury that was already seen the first time as potentially career ending. But yeah, I guess the announcement being anything other than retirement is just nice to see that he is at least going to give it a shot, and probably good for him mentally to be able to give that another opportunity and give that another chance. And I was pretty prepped for a retirement announcement, and Murph's wording absolutely played a role in that. I think he was pretty much hinting at it in a way that he didn't mean to, obviously. But yeah, I mean, I remember when Prince Fielder had his career-ending press conference, and he wasn't even a Brewer at that time, and that was really hard to watch. So it would have been pretty tough, I think, to have to watch Woodruff go through that in that moment. So I'm glad that's not what it is. I'm glad he's at least going to give it another shot and see how it goes. It is definitely interesting that they're changing doctors. Like you said, we don't know for sure, but if we look at the timeline, you think back, and it took longer than the Brewers expected for him to get back on a big league mound in the moment. Like they were adjusting their timeline as they went and starting to go, oh, maybe it'll be this, and kind of playing it like, oh, we kind of knew this might be the case. But early on, they thought the timeline was going to be a lot quicker than it ended up being. Then he obviously has the flare up with the flexor at the end of the year. And then he's got the issue this year. And then he goes to see Keith Meister again, and he basically tells him, like, yeah, this is probably going to happen again. And that, I would imagine, is not something the Brewers were hoping to hear. And then it did obviously happen again, and obviously now he needs the surgery again. So yeah, it doesn't feel like a coincidence that they're changing doctors, but maybe it is. Maybe there's a different reason. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, the same thing I said the whole time last time was I'll be rooting like crazy for the guy to get back on a big league mound and still show that he can perform, because every time Brandon Woodruff is on a big league mound, it has gone well through his whole career. And it was a Yankees fan who tweeted it, actually, but he tweeted out like Brandon Woodruff's career stats, just the Baseball Reference page, and just pointed out how, like, if he's out there, it's been like a sub 3.3 ERA his entire career. He's got the strikeouts, he's got everything else. And it made me think, like, Brandon Woodruff might be one of the better answers to that question that everyone always asks. Like, if you could give an athlete a clean bill of health for their whole career, like, Jacob deGrom is obviously one of the best answers for a pitcher, but in the modern, like the most recent era, like Brandon Woodruff's probably the next guy in line, because it's really unfortunate we never got to see like the full prime of his career, because that dude can pitch. He could pitch and he can pitch whenever he's out there. And it's really unfortunate that this is trending the way it is at this point, which again, I won't rule anything out, but he would be the first to ever do this and make it through 2 surgeries on this exact injury. And that means the odds are not in his favor, but I hope they work out, and I hope we get to see him back on a mound, whether it's as a Brewer, whether it's as on any other team. Like, he's just a guy that I want to root for and I want to see succeed. So hopefully this works out. If not, he did seem to be at least at peace with it a little bit too, talking about how he just had his 3rd kid and he's got a lot to be thankful for in life. And there's been a lot of good stuff that's happened, but you still just want the guy to be able to get that opportunity to go back out there. And you really wish this. You don't wish this on anybody, but it feels like it's almost especially evil that Brandon Woodruff had to be the one who has to go through all of this. But yeah, I'm kind of rambling. I don't know how to wrap it up, but that's kind of where I'm landing on it.
The next notable injury update from the weekend, Sal Frelick departed Friday's game after attempting a throw to second base, and it really just had absolutely nothing on it. Came out of the game. He was quickly placed on the 10-day injured list with a right shoulder strain. He underwent an arthrogram. It revealed, according to Pat Murphy, that there was not anything major wrong. There's a little bit of stuff with the rotator cuff that's kind of an issue right now, some inflammation. He's getting a second opinion currently to kind of see what the treatment options are and what the timeline might look like. To me, though, the interesting note here is when he talked to us after sustaining this injury, or at least after leaving the game with it, he said that this is something that he had been feeling for a few weeks, and it just got to a point where on that Friday game, when he couldn't make the throw, he felt like he was hampering the team at that point, and even though he wanted to continue playing, just in good conscience, could not let himself stay out there if he knew that he was a detriment to the team in the field with the throwing. But he said that he thought this may have cropped up because he was playing through the oblique problem from early in the year and the back problem that was associated with the oblique. And he said that maybe he was putting more stress on his shoulder because he's trying to throw without having the rest of his torso at full strength, which, Spencer, I know you've talked about it a lot. You have felt the entire season that Sal Frelick has not been healthy and that he was playing through something that he should not have been playing through. I'm not a doctor. I don't know exactly how they weigh whether or not a guy should try to play through something, but if the shoulder is an indirect result of playing through a soft tissue injury, and while he was playing through that soft tissue injury, he was not a good player, like, at all, that's not a very good look.
No, it certainly is not. And yeah, man, I felt like I was crazy for a while there because I swore he was stretching the side out and stretching his back and his oblique area out all the time, and nobody would talk about it. Nobody was saying anything about it. I just felt like I was going crazy. But it makes a ton of sense that that would connect to an arm injury of some sort because everything in baseball is rotational. Like, it's a rotational sport. The swing, the throws, all of it. When you can't rotate as well, you put more pressure on your arm. Like, that's just how it works. You have to use your arm more if you're going to try and even throw at close to the same level that you normally do. It would make a ton of sense that those would be connected to me, that he was making throws. He was trying to put everything he had into them without huge rotation in his lower half and his torso. And yeah, I think that maybe is one of the most underrated parts of when people talk about, playing through injuries. And there are certain things that are different, like bone stuff, bruises. Those aren't really going to lead to other injuries. But even like leg stuff for pitchers can lead to arm injuries because you're not getting as much out of your lower half. And for position players, stuff like this can lead to, even on a swing, where you're trying to use more of your legs and your arms to get the swing going instead of doing the rotational moves that you want to make in your swing. But in this case, it was throwing. Like, that's a big part of playing through injuries, that it can lead to other stuff, especially when it's soft tissue stuff. So it just feels like they didn't handle it well at all. It felt like something to me. You see a guy with a minor oblique injury, toss him on the 10-day, see
Early
how
in the
long it
season,
takes.
too. It was
Yes,
the
this is
first week of the
April.
year.
Yes, this might have been March. Yeah, that had technically happened. It was March or April. And yeah, you toss him on the 10-day, you let him heal completely because you have 140 plus games left in the season, and then you see where it goes from there. But having him play through it never made sense to me. They were very clear, like, oh no, he's fine. But I kept watching him and he just didn't look comfortable. He kept stretching. It just feels like another thing that we're talking about here with the health, that, and we don't have, like you said, we're not there. We don't know all of the knowledge of what they maybe deem as too much for a guy to be able to play through, or where they draw that line. But to me, just the timing of it at the beginning of the year, the fact that he never looked comfortable, the fact he wasn't performing, like you said, it just doesn't make sense to handle it like this. And now it seems like it's going to lead to a much more extended absence. It may have led to it sounds like he avoided anything major, but it very well could have led to a more major injury that could have cost him a lot more time. It's just another thing, and we talk about it a lot, but it just feels like they handle these injuries and the medicals and a lot of stuff, just it doesn't end up looking good at the end of it almost every time. And that's a little concerning. Like, it feels like the Brewers do so many things well as an organization, and this particular circumstances, like, they're just not very good at it. Usually they seem to be missing something. I don't know what it is exactly, but it just feels like it doesn't run nearly as smoothly as like almost everything else they do as a club and an organization. And that kind of makes it just stand out. It sticks out like a sore thumb. Like, it's just a clear negative compared to almost everything else that they do. So yeah, this one annoyed me when I found out and he talked about the oblique. I was like, man, I was pretty confident that was still happening, and the fact it led to something else. But the only other thing I'll say is that Sal Frelick specifically is one of those guys who, it wouldn't shock me if he was downplaying what he was feeling. Wouldn't shock me if he was trying to play through stuff that even he knew maybe wasn't a good idea, until it got to the point where he knew on that throw, like you said, like, he knew if a throw was needed to end the game, he would lose the game for the Brewers. And at that point, he was like, okay, I can't do this. But I think before that, the pride was taking over and saying, well, like, I can still do decently. I can still help the team and do a lot of other stuff. And sometimes the team has to save a player from himself, and in the end, it can also be saving the team. And I'm not going to loop it all into bullpen talk, but that's kind of the same stuff we've talked about with that too, where it's like, yes, Aaron Ashby says he's available today. Maybe we don't use him still just because he says he feels good. Like, sometimes you have to save a player from himself because they all want to be out there. They all want to be playing. They all want to be helping the team. It all comes from a good place. But in certain circumstances, they're not able to help the team, and you have to be the one who can say, no, we're putting you on the IL. It's April 3rd. We'll get you healthy, and then you'll have 7/8 of the season at least left that you can play and help the team. That's kind of what just bothers me about the whole situation, is that they don't seem to nip these things in the bud when they have the opportunity to.
They're like you said, we've talked about it. There's a growing track record of it, whether it's we traded for Connor Thomas when he has issues with his elbow. We traded for Nestor Cortez when he had issues with his elbow. We said he's fine, and then the elbow was an issue. We traded for Shelby Miller when he had issues with his elbow, and it immediately popped on him not immediately, but pretty quickly popped on him fully when he came over. That one I can give him a little more leeway on, because I think they got him at the discount kind of by design, knowing that there were some issues there, but you can still throw that in there. And then there might be situations where it's Logan Henderson has a minor back strain. He's down from throwing for a week, and then he misses several weeks and gets an injection. Brandon Lockridge just has a bone bruise. He's going to be back in a couple weeks. Then it turns out that he's got some cartilage problems in his knee and needs to get that fixed. It is a growing list.
Yes.
And I don't want to go so far as to say that they're doing this wrong because, again, a lot of things that I don't know about how this works and that neither of us know about how this works, but it's just it is a growing list of just something seeming off with the way that they handle this or the way that they handle it, like you said, repeatedly does not end up looking good or like they did it the correct way.
Yeah.
Speaking of injury updates, including Brandon Lockridge on a more positive front, he is on a rehab assignment in AAA Nashville. So is David Hamilton. Hamilton could be back by this weekend. The Brewers pretty much saying outright it was going to be a very quick, just get him some game action and then try to get him back to the big league club. I think we talked about this last week. That one's going to be interesting to see because I think, like we talked about more than anyone, I think David Hamilton with a soft tissue injury in his lower half really needs to be someone who is at full strength because so much of his game is dependent on the speed. On that injury front, though, Pat Murphy did say this is the first time that I heard it, and it seemed like the first time a lot of people were hearing it, that David Hamilton was dealing with an elbow issue as well for a few weeks, and that was kind of played off as if we already knew that, and I don't think any of us did. So that's also an interesting one, but it seems like he's fine. It does kind of add another layer to watching him throw the baseball the entire year from third base and things looking weird. So I don't know how that's going to look when he gets back, but they're saying that things are fine now. If he's back this weekend, we'll get a look at just how the speed looks, how the throwing looks, all that stuff, and we'll be able to tell pretty quickly if it's where it needs to be. Brandon Lockridge, though, probably going to be a more extended assignment for him because he's been out of action for a while, but to supporting cast members who the Brewers could be getting back into the fold soon.
Yeah, the Hamilton one is interesting because, like you mentioned, you would think this is one they want to be very certain everything's good before you bring him back because most of his game is reliant on that athleticism and the speed, and that's going to require those soft tissue injuries to not be lingering at all. So the fact that they're playing like a half game and then I think a full game and then planning on bringing him back, like, I just don't think that's necessary given where they are in the standings, given what they have. We'll talk about it. Braden Shoemake has looked completely fine in his opportunities. So it's not like it's a case of, okay, we absolutely need David Hamilton back. And we're going to talk about third base Joey Ortiz. I mean, David Hamilton doesn't need to be getting starts at the moment at third base. So it is a little interesting. They're rushing him back, not rushing him back, but they're moving quickly. We don't know if they're rushing him back. I guess we're going to find out. But again, with the track record, that's where I get a little nervous about this, but we will see how it plays out. And yeah, Lockridge getting back into games is good to see. Hopefully we will be able to see him, within a few weeks here. Everything goes to plan. I guess he only gets 20 days, so that would be about the timeline that they would have to make a call there. Perkins is currently on the roster, right?
Yes.
Okay, after the free leg
spot,
yeah. So I would imagine that would be the spot he gets if Sal is still on the IL at that point, and we'll see where it goes from there. But yeah, I mean, two guys who can definitely help the team when they're on the roster. I would like to make sure Hamilton's back at full speed when he comes back because that is going to be his best asset to the team, I think, at this point with the way that Joey has been playing.
A couple more updates to wrap up. DL Hall. He began a rehab assignment. Pat Murphy said he's going to need at least a few more because he needs to do the multiple innings in Nashville. He needs to do the back-to-backs just to make sure that he's ready to jump right back into the fire. But he's healthy. He's feeling good, building back up in the minor leagues. Kyle Harrison, meanwhile, someone who, again, the Brewers said off the bat it was minor, and it actually does seem like that is proving to be the case. He got back to throwing pretty quickly. He's scheduled for 4 ups of live BP on Saturday, and then he's going to make 1 rehab start, assuming that live BP goes well, and then the Brewers will go from there. So 2 arms to get back into the mix, couple left-handed pitchers who have been big parts of the Brewers' success when on the mound. With that, we can slide right into recapping the week that was at American Family Field. The Brewers taking on the Marlins over the weekend in a 3-game series, a climactic sweep for Milwaukee. 3 close games against a very hot Marlins team right now. Game 1, the Brewers winning 2-1, a narrow walk-off victory for the Crew. Logan Henderson got the ball in this one, 5 innings for him, 3 hits, an earned run on a homer. Did not have the same swing and miss stuff, especially on the fastball in this one, but he did still punch out 4. We can talk about it again when we get to his start at the end of the week. This is usually what you're going to get out of Logan Henderson in a lot of these outings, where there's going to be some swing and miss. Again, not as much in this one, but he had a lot in his last start. Swings and misses, and when guys do make contact, it's probably going to be in the air, which means he's got a chance to be a little bit homer prone. But if he's limiting the free bases, limiting the hits, giving up a solo homer or two in a lot of starts is not going to kill you.
Yeah, there are a lot of really good starters who have been at the top of home runs allowed leaderboards over the years. I mean, Justin Verlander had a stretch where that was like an every year occurrence for him, where he was one of the highest in baseball, but he was still pitching fantastic. Like it's just the way his stuff works, and like you said, it's probably the type of stuff that's going to lead to it a little bit more often than others. I mean, Freddie Peralta, another example of a guy who could kind of run into that issue when he was struggling, but as long as he limited the walks and did everything else, it would still be 5 innings, decent amount of strikeouts, earned run or 2 most days, and then on certain days you might get a little bit more. And in this one, Henderson was still kind of stretching out as well, so they didn't let him go over. I think it was about 80 pitches he threw in this one. So as he gets a little bit more back into things, you might see him stretch out towards 100, and that probably would have bought him a 6th inning in this one. So he was relatively efficient and definitely did a good job giving the Brewers a real chance at this one.
Joey Ortiz hit a game-tying homer in the 5th. Third base Joey Ortiz. Garrett Mitchell then was really the highlight of this one, both defensively and at the plate, with the game in a tight spot in both the 9th and the 10th. 1-1 ball game. He made a couple of nice running plays in center field on some well-struck line drives. And then in the 10th, he comes up with runners on, rolls a walk-off single up the middle. So a productive game for Garrett Mitchell, who continues to be one of the Brewers' most valuable players over the last 6 weeks or so, helping Milwaukee to a 2-1 win in extra innings. Game 2, a little bit more of a high-scoring affair. Not as close as the score made it look, because the Brewers were in control for most of this one, 8-6. Shane Drowan got the start. 6 innings for him, scattered 5 hits, 3 runs. All 3 of them scored in the 2nd inning. Just 1 walk for Shane, 9 punch-outs. A lot better than this line. 6 innings, 3 runs, and 9 Ks is a good line, but I think he was even better than that for much of the start. A lot of the 3-run inning was due to a couple of snafus on combination of well-placed bunts, but also not played great either. So the Marlins able to get to him that way with the infield hits via bunt. Overall, though, he had a 29% whiff rate, an average exit velocity of 80.1 miles an hour, and a 21% hard hit rate. He only had 3 hard hit balls the entire night. So if you are throwing strikes and missing the barrel, generally speaking, that's a pretty good recipe for success. Robert Gasser did have an outing that we're going to talk about toward the end of this series where he did technically do that, but I don't know if that was so much his performance as opposed to maybe the opposing team not swinging the bats great. But Drowan, you could tell in this one, he was going like up and down, north, south, kind of sequencing a little bit more. So a solid outing for him. It was the Braden Shoemake game offensively. He went 2 for 3. He drove in the first run for Milwaukee with a sac fly in the 2nd. Then he scored the tying run on a Jackson Chourio single as part of a 4-run 6th. That inning continued with, once again, Joey Ortiz scoring the go-ahead run on that base hit, and then Garrett Mitchell bringing in a couple of more with a double. Christian Yelich had a 2-run double in the 7th for insurance. We'll talk about him a little bit later. He put some better swings on the ball over the last week. Can still see that he is not moving well, but he did put some better swings on the ball, so that's worth noting. That did end up being worthwhile insurance because Craig Yoho, pitching in back-to-back games, was sent out for a 2nd inning, and it fell apart pretty quickly there after a productive 1st inning. He was in a 2-strike count, a 1-2 hit by pitch to a lefty on a sweeper. Not sure why they called the sweeper to a lefty, but they did. not executed well. That is his fault, but still, I question the pitch call a little bit. After that, issued, I believe it was a 4-pitch walk
Yep.
after that, and then gave up a homer. So it did fall apart pretty quickly for him. Trevor McGill had to come in and record the save. Like I said, the Brewers were in a much better position for most of this one until Yoho came out for the 9th and gave up a couple more. But just interesting to see the usage there. Pat Murphy said post-game that using him for the second up was about saving the rest of the bullpen, which was an interesting quote for me because Pat Murphy has never really been in the business of saving relievers, given how he tends to use some guys. But I can understand if Yoho is going to be on the middle of the pecking order, why they would want to try to give him or try to see if he can be in this multi-inning role when they need it. But back-to-back when Grant Anderson had not pitched in a week, I don't know if that's entirely necessary.
Yeah, that's the fact that you had Anderson sitting there ready to go. Like, that's the part that makes it a lot more difficult for me to understand. If this wasn't the second game out of the All-Star break and you had guys who had been used a ton, like, yeah, sure, try and see how it goes. I mean, I would hope when you send Yoho out there for a second inning on a back-to-back, and not just the back-to-back, he pitched the 10th inning of that game 1. So, like, he pitched a very high leverage situation, got out of it without the zombie runner scoring. It was a really solid job, and Mitchell made a nice catch to help him out. But overall, like, he did a really good job the night before. You send him out, he had a really quick 8th inning, so I think that was a big part of it too. I think he threw like 8 pitches in that inning. So I mean, I can understand how it got to that point, and I do wonder if they never go to that sweeper, if this even becomes much of an issue, and he just gets the out against Hicks, I believe is who he hit in that spot. But he still needs to not, obviously, in that situation, and he would say the same thing. Like, you can't just completely lose the zone then. You can't walk a guy on 4 pitches and then put yourself in a bad count against Conine and give up a pretty middle fastball that gets hit out. Like, he doesn't really have a good excuse for that, but at the same time, you can kind of see how it might have happened and how he may have been a little bit tired and stuff just kind of got away from him a little bit, and it snowballed quickly, and that happens in the big leagues. But either way, I think hopefully the Brewers aren't going to hold that against him too much, because he has looked quite good since he's returned. He's done a lot of really good things, and we'll talk about again in the Mets series, because he had a nice inning there too. But it is one of those things where if you're going to be a leverage guy eventually, like, you can't really have that big of it's not even a long stretch, but you just can't have 5 terrible misses in a row, one of them being a hit by pitch and then a 4-pitch walk, and then end up leaving a pitch right down the middle to one of the better power guys in that lineup, and Conine, and he'll learn from it. I'm not too concerned about him. I'm sure he's aware that he can't do that. I'm just hoping that it doesn't affect how he's been used, because he was trusted in the 10th inning, and they have been giving him a little bit more opportunity to go out and get some bigger outs. So I hope that continues.
Game 3, a 3-1 win for the Brewers. This was the most climactic game of the series. Another walk-off. William Contreras with the Brewers down 1-0. Hit a 3-run homer off Pete Fairbanks in a 1-2 count. Interesting pitch call from the Marlins. He was late on fastballs. It's 1-2, and they called it cutter. Now, it wasn't supposed to be right down the middle, which is where Pete Fairbanks left it, but I still thought that was an interesting call. The way the Marlins are doing the pitch calling is fascinating to me, because they've been calling pitches from the dugout this year. But my understanding from the stuff I've looked at is that it's very algorithm based, and they have a model that's it gives them a few options of which pitch to throw. Lance Brzdowski did a video on it last year or early this year where he kind of looked into it a little more. And I think there was at one point in that video like a screenshot of the sheet of paper that they're looking at, or at least a recreation of it. And you could kind of see it was like a model kind of telling you like what your usage patterns should be and these counts to these hitters, I think it was. I don't know if I agree that that's the best way to do it. We talk a lot about reading swings on this show, and I maybe they're factoring that in too. I don't know, but just kind of seeing the way that they called pitches this entire series, there were just some weird ones to me, almost William Contreras-esque in a couple ways,
I
where it
was
just
just
seemed like
gonna say.
it was like not only like something I wouldn't do, but like the actively wrong call you would think with where the hitter's timing was. So I am curious if, and I'm saying this is the guy who likes analytics, if they're almost going too model heavy with how they're calling some stuff and maybe not reading the hitter enough. I don't know, but this was a weird one too. Credit Contreras for getting the mistake pitch and being able to ambush it. That's what you do with that pitch, but just strange to see that one in kind of way that they called pitches the entire series, especially because like they're doing something that no other team is
Mhm.
doing, like the full calls from the dugout and having a coach looking at information and sending in the pitch call that way.
Yeah, I felt the same. It was kinda odd watching it and going, "Wow, I expected to watch it and go, "Okay, yeah, they're doing a lot of stuff that makes sense." I haven't looked into it much. I didn't see the video from Lance, who does, I mean, some of the best stuff on YouTube and out that he makes great videos on a bunch of different things, and even one on the Brewers system not too long ago that was very good. But it felt the whole series that there were a lot of times the Brewers were in counts or they had buried themselves with a couple swings and then they just threw a pitch that played right into what they were doing the whole at bat and gave them the opportunity to get on time. And like you said, it felt like William Contreras. Maybe Contreras was thinking right along the same lines as them, and that's why he was just completely on that cutter that he got and he was able to crush it. But I mean, that was a good moment for him because everything we've talked about with him, he had struggled offensively for a pretty long stretch there. It had not been great. The overall numbers had hovered all the way down or cratered all the way down to like league average going into the All-Star break. So a good moment for him. Nice to see him come through in that spot and take advantage of the mistake because they made a mistake, and when you get them, you got to take advantage of it still. So the other part of it is none of Pete Fairbanks's pitches look like how they're labeled when you're watching it on TV. Like that did not look, that looked like a slider. It almost looked like a short curveball with how much downward movement it
His
had.
cutter is a slider.
Right.
His slider's a curveball and his cutter's a slider.
Right. Yes. And that was the funny part because everyone kept talking about cutter, and it was a cutter, and that's what he calls it. But yeah, it looked like a hanging breaking ball, which is what it was. And he was on time. He crushed it, and a pretty exciting bat flip as well. That was about as high as I've seen one in anything other than like the Dominican Winter League or the WBC. So he got that one sky high. I love that guys can pretty safely do that now and not have to worry too much about repercussions as long as they don't aim it at the other team or anything. So, yeah, it was a cool moment. It was a good way to finish off a series that I would say the Brewers didn't play great in, but they still swept a team that's been quite good this year. I do think the Marlins now have lost. I believe they left Milwaukee and got swept again. I think they've lost 9 in a row, so maybe caught them at the right time. But they've been a really solid team, and to go out and pitch well and be able to steal all 3 games, it really first and third were the ones that you kind of stole from them. But it was a nice series given the fact that I still don't think the Brewers were playing very good baseball, and that's kind of continued all the way back from the road trip where they went 6-5, even with a sweep at the end of it, and it still didn't feel like they were playing great during that stretch. But it's a sign of a good team that they can continue to pull out games even when they're probably not even playing close to their best.
I do want to talk about Robert Gasser briefly. He got the ball in this one, 5 innings, 3 hits, only 1 run, punched out 5. That lone run, and Estuary Ruiz solo homer. He's got 5 home runs this year, which is like, that seems unbelievable to me, but he does. This was an interesting start for me because obviously the results are good. He, like we talked about, like he threw strikes and missed barrels. Those are pretty much like if you're trying to boil down what do you want a pitcher to do, that he has a little more control over than the results. You know, throw pitches that are going to miss the barrel, whether that's swing and miss, whether it's weak contact, maybe both. He definitely did that in this one. But then you watching the game in real time, And then also going back after his outing and looking at the pitch locations, at no point in this start did I really think to myself, man, he's pitching really well. It was a lot of like, he got ahead early to some guys. It was basically most of his pitches were either right down the middle or very close to right down the middle or not super competitive outside the zone. And you can look at that and say, well, getting ahead first pitch strike, like if you're going to throw a ball down the middle, the first pitch is the pitch to do it, like to get ahead. I would much rather a first pitch strike down the middle than a first pitch that's, not even close or trying to paint the corner and you miss. Like we watched Jose Quintana do that a ton, and that was not fun to watch last year. But the reason that I bring this up and that it stands out to me for Gasser specifically is we have seen when he gets in trouble, it's been because the command has been really bad, to be blunt. It hasn't been that way in every start, but in the bad starts, the command has been bad. And the sweeper is a good stuff pitch, but everything else is not necessarily a great stuff pitch. So he is always going to be someone who's a little more reliant on the sequencing and the tunnels and hitting the spots. It's going to be a bigger deal for him. So I guess to me, when I see that he has had command issues and that's been kind of a recurring problem, and then he goes out and has an outing like this where he doesn't get hit hard at all, but the command still did not look very good. That's kind of why I circle this a little more and think, okay, like this is an outing where you look at the box score line, you even look at like the quality of contact, and you might say, hey, he's on the right track. He bounced back. He's getting in a groove here after a rough start in Pittsburgh. I don't quite know if that was the case. And I don't want to take too much away from him, but I just taking it even a step further process wise, like making pitches and knowing what kind of pitches he needs to make and what kind of pitches we've seen him not make, and it comes back to hurt him. I think if he was facing a lot of different lineups in this one, I don't know if you would have had the same outcome, and then the narrative becomes a lot different about where he is and kind of where he pencils in and all this kind of stuff. So that's just why I took note of it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I would agree. Having watched it, it didn't feel like he should be getting jam shots and soft liners and grounders and just a lot of pitches that were in hittable locations. And sometimes you just get away with that. Obviously, it can happen over the course of a season where you have a game where you just kind of get away with a bunch of mistakes. And then there are going to be games where you make a lot of good pitches and teams are able to just kind of poke them around the yard and do their thing anyway. But it did feel like this is actually more like two starts in a row where he didn't really have the feel for his stuff that you're hoping to see from a guy like him. And command is, we talked about it early in the season when we were pretty concerned about what we were seeing the first two starts out. Like that was the biggest concern. He didn't really get away with it much in either of those two. They weren't awful lines, but he didn't get away with it a ton. This did feel more like that type of start than what we saw for a pretty decent stretch there of maybe 4 or 5 starts where it was all pretty good command, living on the edges, being able to use the fastball, the four seam up, the sinker away, down to get grounders and all that stuff. We weren't seeing that as much. We saw a lot of stuff kind of circled right up in that middle of the zone or hovering around the middle of the zone. So I think it's something where if you see that another time or two and you start to get guys back, I think, as you mentioned, it does have to be part of the consideration for who gets to keep a rotation spot, who either moves to the bullpen, goes back to Nashville. Maybe there's a deadline addition that gets added to the fold as well. So it does make things more interesting if he doesn't start to show that command he was showing in the middle starts of his season so far.
On the positive side, he did have a velo bump.
Yep.
There were good portions of this game where he was sitting close to 94 after sitting more in that 90 to 92 range for a lot of the season. So, oddly enough, you said he didn't seem like he had a great feel for his stuff. Like from a command standpoint, I'd agree with that. But like the way the ball was coming out of his hand, the traits were actually probably about as good as they've been. And maybe that was part of it too. Maybe that's why he got more of those kind of swings. But yeah, this one just goes down as much more of a mixed bag for me than really solid 5 innings, 1 run, the way that you might be inclined to read it.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Moving on to the Mets series, the Brewers taking 2 of 3 from New York, and once again, did not really look at their best for a good chunk of this series, but my God, the Mets are bad this year. And they did take advantage of that a little bit in this series. Game 1 was perhaps the most hyped matchup of the showdown. The Jacob Mizorowski and Freddie Peralta matchup. Pretty lopsided for a good chunk of this game. Milwaukee 8, Mets 3. We'll start with how Freddie Peralta performed in this one. 5 1/3 for him, so he did end up rebounding enough to give them some length after it started pretty poorly. 8 hits for Freddie. He gave up 7 earned runs, couple walks, 6 Ks, 2 homers, doing a good chunk of the damage as well there. Doc asked us on Twitter, is Freddie cooked, or does he really just miss Milwaukee that much? So I believe his velo is down a tick, which is probably playing into some stuff, and he's not getting nearly the same swing and miss on the fastball. But like a lot of the properties of the pitches and even some of the peripherals, I don't think he's that different from who he was for a good chunk of his time in Milwaukee. I think, number one, he's probably playing in front of a defense that is not helping him wiggle out of trouble in the same ways that he did when he was here. And maybe that's where it's like the just missing Milwaukee thing. Maybe he just had a support system that worked for him that kind of allowed him to bob and weave in that way, whether it was a defense or it was, the pitching coaches or just comfort with his environment. Maybe he was able to step up and make some bigger pitches in those situations. I don't know for sure. It seems really close, I feel like. And it's, like I said, the stuff is maybe a little bit worse, but not significantly worse. I wonder if they have tried some adjustments that have not worked for him. I know he's pitching out of the windup again. He was doing that in this start. He's been doing it for about a month. Seemed like that was a response to his struggles. We tended to see Freddie at his best here when he was not pitching out of the windup and after he scrapped a lot of that extra movement. So it's kind of interesting to me to see that he's back to something that never really did work. To me, that kind of is the sign of a pitcher who's lost a little bit and he's searching for answers and nobody is really giving him any good answers or giving him any good guidance. So maybe it is missing Milwaukee. All things considered, I would say the pieces around him, I do think, are just as much of an issue. Like, just from an outside perspective, what I'm seeing, I think the pieces that are around him are as much of an issue as the way that he's actually throwing the baseball.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about it in game 3 of this series, but the Mets defense is definitely a big step down from what he's had behind him in Milwaukee. It is interesting, like the extension is the lowest it's ever been for him. His arm slot is down 3 or 5 degrees from last year, which that's a little bit beyond like the normal change you see from year to year. Like that 5 degrees starts to be a legitimate difference. But yeah, when you look at like the pitch shapes and everything, nothing's changed a ton. You do have to wonder if, Chris Hook is a bit of a mechanical whisperer. Like he really knows what he's talking about with that. He can pick up on slight changes or slight issues that the pitchers might have that he's been around for a long time. And he may have been able to correct some things that Freddie was doing early in the season and boom, get him right back on track. And he might not have that same level of expertise in New York. He might not have the same comfort level with the people that he's working with that he had in Milwaukee. But a lot of the talent still seems to be there, which is definitely the more confusing part of it. And I'm sure, like, we saw it. Freddie Peralta got himself in a lot of trouble when he was in Milwaukee in terms of leaving guys on base, having base runners almost every inning. There were walks. There were struggles with command. Almost like once a game, it felt like he had an inning where it kind of escaped him for a little bit. And maybe it was, Chris Hook was able to go out, make a mound visit and correct some things in the moment for him too. Like get him through that big inning. Because we've talked about it before. At the beginning of his career, he had a lot of trouble with the big inning. And I think the biggest difference throughout the rest of his Brewers career was that he may take 30 pitches to get through it, but he would usually limit those big innings to like a run. And he might leave the bases loaded, but it wasn't turning into those huge 4-5 run innings. It seems like that has happened a little bit more to him this year, where innings have really just gotten away from him. And you do wonder again if that's maybe somebody, whether maybe it was William Contreras having a good feel for how to calm him down and get him back on track, or Chris Hook. Like, you do have to wonder about that, but it is weird because other than the arm slot and the extension, like most of the other stuff is there. But when you combine less extension, less velo, the arm slot dropping a little bit, maybe making it a slightly more hittable shape, like it, maybe that's all it took. Maybe he was on that razor's edge of being a really good pitcher and not, because that is something that pitchers live on. Like, they can be a slight downgrade away from going, they can go from a really solid big league pitcher to a not great one just from a tick of velo, a slight change to the shape, a slight change to the mechanics. It's a really small margin of error for some of these guys. And it would not surprise me if Freddie was kind of riding that line, because he always was a little bit of a work into and out of trouble type of guy.
We mentioned the 2 homers against Freddie. One of those is off the bat of Cooper Pratt, his first career homer. One that I was surprised to see get out, to be completely honest with you, because he hit it hard. He put a good swing on it, but he did not barrel that baseball, and it just kept going.
It's feeling like 2019 all over again a little bit. I can't remember seeing this many sub 100 mile per hour exit velos go over the fence other than 2019. Like, that's the only time I remember this happening as much. I think this was 96 off the bat for Pratt, I believe. Yeah, that was not making it into the bullpen most of the last 5 years or so, if I would say. But like you said, still a good swing. Very cool to see him get that. It's always nice to see a guy get his first. It had been nearly a month since, or a month worth of games. He had been up for more than a month since he debuted. So to see him get that opportunity, or to see him get one over the fence, I'm sure that felt like a little bit of a monkey off the back for him.
Andrew Vaughn and Joey Ortiz, third base Joey Ortiz, also adding homers in this one for a productive night for the Brewers offense. Jacob Mizorowski on the other end was also a big story in this one. He was coming off of that nearly 2-week layoff with the way that the Brewers organized his starts leading into and coming out of the All-Star break. Pat Murphy said pregame that monitoring the workload is going to be among the Brewers' goals and among their concerns in the second half here. He said that that's most likely to take the form of, yes, maybe we use the schedule to push a start back if we can by a day or two, but by and large, it's mainly just going to be, they're going to shorten his outings, and they're going to just kind of find opportune times to do that. Maybe you take 3 to 6 outs off of an outing, and then those, if you do that 3 or 4 times, that kind of adds up to a few innings, and that's just the difference between how much can you get out of him in the playoffs, having him in good shape. Like we talked about last week, I did ask if just getting stronger physically plays a role in what they think he's capable of and the innings growth, and Murph said absolutely. Like, you can't just go off of what he threw last year, because he is different this year. He's a different guy, different physically, so they're going to kind of play it that way. But the way that they ended up handling things in this one was only 4 innings for Jacob Mizorowski. He gave up 1 run. It was not earned. 4 hits, a walk, 6 strikeouts. Murphy said post-game that this was going to be a shorter start coming out of that long layoff as they built him back up here. But 4 innings was maybe not as... They didn't think it was going to be quite that short, but they decided to make that move because he didn't look great. Obviously, he was not getting hit hard. The four-seamer was still getting a ton of whiffs when guys did swing at it, but he was a little more sporadic. I think it only had like a 47% in-zone rate. They did make the adjustment the second time through. They threw as many cutters as fastballs second time through, and we've complained a lot about seeing Jacob Mizorowski cutters the last couple weeks, but I think this is one time where it did make sense to do that. Like we've said, the cutter is what you go to when there needs to be a necessary adjustment off the fastball. something that you're seeing that tells you, like, okay, we can't throw this as much as we are. Normally, I would say they're starting to time it up. The Mets obviously were not, but in this case, Miz was spraying it around a little bit.
Yeah.
So there is something there where you're like, okay, we do need to make a change there because the most valuable pitch in baseball is a strike. And the cutter, he was throwing in the zone like 60% of the time in this one. I asked him post game kind of why they made the change, and he said, I just didn't have my legs under me. So throwing the cutter kind of forces me to be a little bit shorter and just get my body into a better position to throw more strikes with how I was feeling. So I'm okay with making the adjustment there because again, then it's an actual adjustment. Like that is what the cutter should be. It's an adjustment. It's not, oh, we're trying to be one step ahead of the guy and get cued and do this sequence. It's for one reason or another, fastball is maybe not, based on what we have seen in this game and these at bats, it's maybe not quite like head above everything else, the best pitch right now.
Yeah, this made much more sense than it has in other cases because, like you said, it was the pitch he was throwing strikes with, and what he said after the game makes some sense too. Just the fact that it kind of required him to do things a little bit differently, and the fact that he wasn't feeling himself in the lower half. Like I can see that happening. I've had that as a pitcher where certain pitches just kind of force you to get into the position that you need to be in, whereas the fastball is more of a loose, I'm going to fire this thing hard and I'm going to kind of let my body move how it's used to moving. But if it's not moving how I'm used to it moving, then it can cause some issues. And yeah, it also made sense to me that the fact that the legs were kind of out of it, the Brewers said, we're not going to be stupid here. Like if he's not using his legs as well, he's not feeling his legs as well, then he's going to use his arm more because he still is going to want to throw around triple digits. And that's when you start to put the risk on the arm. And that's what we've talked about a lot with him, is that he does a very good job of taking the risk off of the arm because he does such a good job with his legs. I think they handled it really well. I think it was the correct decision. It makes a lot of sense in my mind. And they were always going to leave it a shorter start, like you said, but the fact that they were able to adjust on the fly and kind of notice, hey, this is not right. This is not what we're used to seeing from him. Let's be smart. Let's let him build up a little bit, maybe a little bit slower than we were expecting out of the break. But either way, like it's a way to manage innings and pitches and everything else on top of that. So especially with the nice lead after the Brewers kind of took care of Freddie Peralta.
Part of the reason why the Brewers were able to survive a shorter Jacob Mizorowski outing, nice work out of the bullpen by Craig Yoho and Lance McCullers. So let's start with McCullers first, just because he covered more innings in this one, and he's the newer acquisition in that Brewers bullpen. His Brewers debut in long relief, 3 innings, 2 hits, a couple of runs, a walk, 4 strikeouts. Even the line kind of misleads a little bit as to how good he looked for most of this one. The first 2 innings were great. It just got away from him in that third. The mix was not really a whole lot different than what he was doing in Houston. He was just spotting it well, winning counts. Had a couple of nice strikeouts on breaking pitches. Actually, the second inning started mixing in the breaker a little more, even as an in-zone pitch, which is what I know you really wanted to see. So I'm sure you were happy about that. I see that cheeky smile on your face right now. But I thought for the most part, it looked quite good. A little better than I was expecting it to.
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest way for me to sum it up is it looked like a guy who can get you outs out of the bullpen and can possibly do it for extended outings. I think the stuff is good enough that, especially the secondaries, that if you put him in a 1-inning role and you need a leverage inning out of him, like I think he's capable of getting those types of outs too. So it was encouraging. It was really, really nice to see. And like you said, him landing the breaking balls. I mean, you were absolutely right. If he's not landing the breaking balls, he can't throw them a ton. But I think if he can land them in the zone, then that's the way I'd like them to go. And I liked the way they attacked for the most part. It seemed like he tired a little bit in that third. Everything just kind of stayed up. And that usually is a sign of a guy who's wearing down a little bit. And he's coming off rehab assignments. And I think his last one was almost a week before the All-Star break, if I remember right. So it had been a pretty long break between outings, including a trade and everything else. So I think he'll be capable of going 3 or even 4 innings out of the pen if they need it. But it was an encouraging first outing. I didn't know exactly what we would see. Who knows if we'll see it every time out. We saw Jared Koenig come back off the IL and look a lot different than what he looked the rest of the time in that first outing. But if we see that version of him, like you said, that line, I mean, that's a 6 ERA technically in his 3 innings, but I don't think that's indicative of how he was pitching. He looked a lot more like a big league reliever in that outing than the final line says.
As long as you mentioned Jared Koenig, I don't think we brought this up. The Brewers did option him first to Nashville originally, as I believe it was the corresponding move for McCullers to bring him onto the active roster. Pat Murphy did say pretty quickly, though, they were actually going to send him to Arizona. They made that actual move on paper a few days later. He is going to do some side work at the spring training facility in Phoenix because they're just going to try to find a way to get the stuff right. Whether that's get a little bit of that lost velo. The shapes were not dramatically different, but every pitch in the arsenal was like just different by an inch or two. And I think when you kind of add that up, you can kind of understand how the way it's playing is maybe not quite the same. You could see he was trying to pitch differently too, without like the conviction on the fastball was not there. And when he's at his best, like we've talked about, a lot of his game is literally just throw the comeback two-seamer right down the middle and get bad swings with it. So you could see he was going way more change up to righties, way more cutter to lefties, just clearly not trusting that pitch the same way. So he's going to be in Arizona for now, and TBD if he comes back. I think they need to see better down there. So they're going to take another crack at this and see if they can get him on track.
Yeah, I kind of forgot he was optionable, so that was ideal, and it did make a lot of sense for them to handle it this way, I think. But I wouldn't say I have super high hopes for it working out. I didn't the whole season, to be honest. Like, it just never felt like it was coming back together for him, and he's already an older reliever. Like a pretty steep downturn in some of his stuff isn't shocking no matter what, but when you add in some of the arm stuff he was dealing with early in the season, it felt kind of unlikely he would help. But the fact that they can option him, let him work through things at whatever pace they feel comfortable, he feels comfortable, that is ideal. Hopefully they figure it out, because the best version of Jared Koenig deserves to be in the Brewers bullpen, and he can help the Brewers bullpen. But the current version doesn't look like a big league pitcher. And we just talked about McCullers. Like, that version of McCullers looks a lot more like a big league pitcher than the version we saw of Koenig when he was back and healthy.
As did the version of Craig Yoho that we saw in this game.
Yep.
Threw a lot of changeups and looked really good. Got a lot of swings and misses with those changeups. I think only one swing was contact on the changeup in this inning. The highlight, though, was back-to-back, making Juan Soto and Bo Bichette look foolish while just throwing them changeup after changeup. Especially Soto, I think it was 3 straight changeups, and just looked foolish on all 3 of them, including back-to-back whiffs to end the at-bat. Like, the changeup is a good pitch. We've talked about it a lot. We don't need to go through the whole thing, but just let him throw his good pitch competitively, and I really think he's going to be fine.
Jack, I was told that it is not a swing and miss pitch, actually, by someone pretty close to the team even that said that.
Yes. I was in the room. It was my question. So, yes, I heard that too.
Yeah.
I did follow up with the manager about this the next day and asked if that turned some heads, and he said it does, but he also said it was the first time Soto had seen him, and it was an 8-1 game. It's not an 8-1 game, but that's what he said. I'm trying, man.
It was 5-1 in the 5th to be clear on that. But yes, no, that was impressive. Those are 2 guys who, Bo Bichette's not having a good year, but he doesn't whiff much. Like, he's still a guy who puts the ball in play a lot. So 2 guys who don't whiff very often, and he made them look pretty bad. And the fact that he can throw it to righties, he can throw it to lefties. Like, it's not a platoon. It is a platoon neutral pitch. Like, it's not something that needs to be, he needs the breaking ball against righties and then the changeup's only against lefties. He can throw it to anybody. It's a very good pitch. He was throwing it a little bit harder in this outing, which could be something we did talk about, actually, when he got sent down after that Red series, that could be something that would help potentially. Who knows if it does or not, but it's interesting. It's something to keep an eye on if it stays in like the low 80s. Because to me, it does seem more likely to work there, where the hitter doesn't have time to kind of give that secondary swing to it and maybe get a piece of it or foul it off because he has that extra split second to wait on it. So that'll be interesting to watch too. But yeah, these are two hitters that have a long track record. Again, Bichette not having the great year, but the thing that he is still doing well is putting the ball in play. So it was cool to see him make two of those guys look pretty bad.
Moving on to game 4. This is the poorest played game of the series for Milwaukee. They lost 4-0. Brandon Sproat got the start, and it was a Brandon Sproat start, 4 2/3. Didn't throw a lot of strikes. Also didn't get hit because he's got really, really good stuff. 4 2/3, 4 hits, 2 earned runs, 4 walks, 4 strikeouts, and a homer. Even the second run came to score when he was already out of the game. Regardless, though, just spraying the ball around again quite a bit and just not very efficient. And there's not a whole lot more to say. It's just kind of the same issues that aren't really going away. It seemed like they were for a little bit, but now they've cropped back up for like the last 3 or 4 starts. And this is just kind of where he's at. They're going to let him work through it still. I think you have to keep giving him the opportunities. You can't be close to giving up on him because you know that the fact that he doesn't give up more runs while throwing the baseball like this is a testament to how good the stuff is. But we're just not really seeing growth here.
Yeah, I still kind of wonder if they do add at the deadline to the rotation, if they find that Henderson stays healthy and they just don't have a spot for him, if there could be an interesting role for him in the bullpen by the end of the year, where like I could see him sitting 100 in a 1-inning stint out of the bullpen with a fastball, and if he throws enough strikes with it, like it could play pretty well, I think. But yeah, it feels like definitely should not be anywhere near giving up on him, but it does kind of feel like you're kind of hoping for 2027 at this point to be the year that you see the version you're hoping for. Like, no matter what happens the rest of the year, it feels unlikely that you're going to get to that point. But if he can hold his own in the rotation while they need him in there, and then if they eventually don't, and he can find a role in the bullpen by the end of the year, because again, I do think the stuff would play very well in that role, and I wouldn't leave him in the bullpen after the end of this season, but he'll be coming up on his pitch limits at some point. He's been, the one thing you can say about him is he's been out there every single time. He's been healthy. He's been able to take the mound every time, take the ball. So that's been a positive for him, because that's not the case for almost anybody else in the rotation or on the staff. So you will come up on an innings limit. The pitch counts have been very high in most of these outings in not a ton of innings. So I could see the pen being a decent landing spot for him either way. So maybe that's how it works out. But again, if you tell me 2027 Brandon Sproat is a very good starting pitcher for the Brewers, I won't be surprised in the slightest. It just has not come together this year, and it feels like it's taken a little bit longer than the Brewers and Sproat would definitely like to see.
Bryce Wilson did his job in long relief in this game, covering the final 4 innings. He was hit very, very hard, like very, very hard. He only gave up 1 run on a solo homer, but I think it was either 8 out of 11 or 8 out of 13 balls were hard hit. Most of them were in the air. But in his role that he is being asked to fill, the job is not necessarily to get good swings. The job is to just pound the strike zone, and he definitely did that. I think it was like 50 of 65 pitches that he threw for strikes. So he went out there and he did what he needed to do, eating up some innings, joining Lance McCullers as just a guy at the back end of that bullpen who helped get the Brewers through this week in a pretty good spot, even though they got a couple of shorter starts. That was pretty much the end of the positives in this one, though. The Brewers offensively did not play a great game. They managed just 4 hits. I know they had a couple of hard hit flyouts, and the narrative kind of seemed to be they hit some balls hard and didn't get a lot to show for it, but they had a 26.9% hard hit rate in this game. Like they did not actually make that much loud contact. I think it was more the fact that just about every time they did hit a ball hard, it was in the air and it was caught near the warning track. So I think a lot of people see that and they're like, oh man, like unlucky, but they really weren't. They had maybe 1 or 2 balls that I think had like close to a 600 XBA that got caught. So like those I can see, but on the whole, like they did not hit well in this game, and it was not a luck problem. The defense was sloppy, to say the least, especially in the fifth inning. Both plays, oddly enough, involving Bryce Terang, usually one of the Brewers' best defenders and one of the best defenders in baseball. Chad Patrick came in with a runner on base for Sproat, gets a Francisco Lindor grounder. Bryce Terang dives, can't glove it cleanly on the dive. It kind of skips off the glove. It's right behind him in shallow right center, and he just kind of stands there, forcing Garrett Mitchell to come in and try to field that ball. That allows Lindor to get to second. So just odd to see him give up on that one, and he saw where the ball was. He was turned around and he's looking at the ball and he's not going for it. Then Carson Benj hits a ball in the hole between first and second. We've seen Bryce Terang's range. That is a play that he normally makes, I'm not going to say in his sleep, but usually pretty easily.
Yeah.
He took a few steps toward it, stopped. I think he just, for whatever reason, did not seem to understand like whose ball that was. Andrew Vaughn did take a couple steps toward it, but I mean, from my seat in the press box and then at my desk watching the replay, like that's very obviously Bryce Terang's ball. That not for a second was that the first baseman's ball. So just odd to see him not go after that, especially too, because even if Vaughn is going for it, like why would you not just at least be there to back him up if he's going for it? And you're like, there's nowhere else for you to be on that play. So it's kind of weird to see him give up on that. The ball gets through. Luis Lara then decides that he's going to throw behind Benj when Benj is already taking like a big round off first, starting to go towards second. So he gets into second base easily, just not well executed for a couple of hitters there in the fifth inning as part of a bigger Mets inning to kind of pull away a little bit.
Yeah, the Terang plays where I've talked to you about this, and it's not a huge knock on him or anything, but I feel like he's terrible at diving for especially ground balls. Like he'll make some nice catches. He'll make some diving catches, but I don't remember very many diving plays on the ground for Bryce Terang, and it feels like he's late to dive almost every time. Like the ball is kind of already getting by him and he just doesn't time them very well. The first play was not an easy one on Lindor, but a guy of his caliber and with his range, like I would think that'd be like a 50-50 play. And for me, when I watch Terang, it's like a 10% play that he's going to make it. And I don't know how to fully explain it, but just it doesn't look comfortable when he dives on ground balls. Like it just never has. I think back to against the Mets actually in New York a few years ago, or a couple of years ago maybe, and he dove like over a ball that almost went like under his neck. Like he doesn't seem to have a good feel for it. And it's a weird thing for a guy who's so good at what he does on defense. The second one is just a brain lapse. It seems like I don't know. Like you mentioned, even if Andrew Vaughn is going after that ball extremely hard, even if he's like selling out for that ball, that doesn't mean he's going to make the play. Like you should still be making your way over there hard, not like, oh, maybe I'll, kind of make my way and meander over there. Like, no, this should be your ball until Andrew Vaughn fields it in that scenario. Like that's how you have to think about things as an infielder is take the angle that you can get to it. And if someone cuts it off in front of you, that's great. But you don't just stop playing ever like that. And it's not something Terang ever does. Like he's one of the best in baseball at backing up throws to first on bunts and doing all those little things. So it's just very weird to see from him. I don't expect it to be a problem. I would bet it honestly probably never happens again, but it was a weird play. The Lara part was the mistake he probably made there was that Benj had gone so far that he probably could have just ran at him, just make him make a decision. If Chad Patrick just catches and makes a decent throw, I think he's still out at second base. Like, I don't think it was the worst decision in the world to throw to first, but in most cases, you'd rather throw to the base in front of him, keep him. Worst case scenario, he just gets back to first. But yeah, I think the correct call would have been to throw to run at him and make him make a decision before you make the throw. the safest call would have been just make the throw to second base, and maybe you get him picked back off at first on a relay from Pratt, but none of it was very well executed. I thought the terrain part of it was the more confusing, and the part that it was very abnormal, not something you normally see from him. So again, I doubt we ever see it again. I would imagine he already was kicking himself and probably knew that he messed up right away in that moment. But it was interesting because you don't ever see that from a guy like him.
Yeah. I think Lara in a split-second moment thought he had an opportunity for an out there, and the play just didn't
Right.
it didn't unfold the way that in that split second he thought it was about to unfold.
Yeah.
One more mishap for the Brewers on the bases as well in the 6th inning. Pitch gets away. You have Joey Ortiz on first. Pratt's on second. Basically what happened was Ortiz broke. Pratt did not. Then that forces Pratt to get a late jump to third. He's out easily. Pat Murphy post-game said if you had to pick one guy to blame more, it's Ortiz, because as that runner, you have to be looking ahead and see that the guy on second is not going. At the same time, though, you could also say Pratt could have read that ball better and should have just been taking off. That's what I've seen some people say. I would kind of just lean toward it. Didn't get too far away from him. Joey, more than anything, he's got to be looking at the runner ahead of him.
Yeah, to me, this is, if I'm remembering the pitch right, this wasn't a pitch. Was this a pitch that bounced, or was it one that was like up and out and got away from the catcher? I feel like he was reaching. I don't remember it being in the dirt. I thought it was one of the ones where it like clanked it a little bit, which to me, those are the hardest, if that's what it was, and that's how I'm remembering it at least. Those are the hardest ones to read at second base, because one, you're not reading it down and in the dirt. So that's like the first thing you're looking for when you're a base runner is this pitch going to be in the dirt? And you're getting a little bit of a shuffle and trying to read what's happening there. If it's not in the dirt, you don't get that extra little hop in there. And then you also have a much more difficult time of finding where that ball is and how hard it kind of clanked off the glove, how far it's rolling. You can't really see it from second base. You can see it a lot more clearly from first because you have the angle to see where the ball's rolling. Those are actually hard. And I get it. Like on TV, it's obvious. And everyone always gets upset with runners when they're on second base and they don't go on a ball that either sneaks through the catcher's legs or does what I'm, again, imagining this play was. I'm pretty sure it didn't bounce, or if it did, it was more like he was not picking it, but it was low and it wasn't actually in the dirt. Like I'm almost certain this didn't skip in to the plate. But either way, when the ball is only rolling behind the catcher, like there's a lot of noise in front of you as a runner on second base. Like the catcher is blocking your view to the ball. The pitcher can be, even the base umpire can kind of be in the way of your view of the ball when you're on second. So like you have to be sure in a game where the Brewers are down and he's not like the tying run in that scenario, you have to be sure that that ball got away far enough for you to go. It's on the guy on first to not run you off. Like you just can't. And maybe even the worst part of it is that Ortiz went back to first once Pratt took off for third. Like, no, now you got to go to second because we're going to get out. Someone's going to be out here. Let's make sure we at least have a guy in scoring position at the end of it. So they ended up with just a guy on first and 2 outs at the end of it. It was, to me, that's almost entirely on Joey Ortiz. And yeah, you'd hope that Pratt could read it perfectly in that scenario, but it's not as easy as it looks on TV. I've seen it. I've been there. I've been the guy on second base and the ball it's kind of sneaks away from the catcher. And you're like, I don't know where it is. Like it's not going to the backstop. Is it going 5 feet? Is it going 15, 20? You just can't read it from there. So it always looks a lot easier. It's one of the easiest things to see on TV versus being in the point of view of the runner on second base. And I always have a little bit of a soft spot for guys who everyone gets really upset with in that moment because I've witnessed it. I've probably been the guy people were mad at in the game where I didn't take off because I just couldn't tell and I didn't want to make a stupid out at third. And then, of course, in this scenario, they ended up making a stupid out at third anyway and not advancing to second either way. So it was just a culmination of a lot of not great baseball in that stretch of the 5th and 6th inning. And they lost 4-0, and they probably deserved to in this one. They just didn't play very clean baseball.
Brewers would bounce back in Game 3 with a 4-3 win. Logan Henderson making his second start of the week in this one. 5 innings, 5 hits, 2 runs, again on solo homers, but a lot of whiffs, 9 strikeouts for him. Story of the game was the Joey Ortiz game. Third base Joey Ortiz went 3 for 3. He drew a walk. He drove in 2 runs, scored 2 runs. He finished a home run shy of the cycle, walked in that final at bat, and there were some boos from the home crowd after he drew a walk in that last at bat instead of being able to complete the cycle. But another productive day for him. He was right in the middle of a 3-run second inning for the Brewers. That triple, to provide some nuance, did come on one of the worst routes I think I've ever seen from Brett Beatty, who is a third baseman playing right field. He did play a little bit of left in the minor leagues, so I guess he is somewhat accustomed to the outfield, but reads are also different in right than they are in left, and you could tell he just had no idea where he was going on this ball. He was running in circles. That came with 2 outs, too, so pretty big deal there, turning that into a 2-run triple instead of what probably should have been an inning-ending flyout if he plays it well. Christian Yelich then singling Ortiz home. He was not the story of this game, but he did have 2 key run-scoring hits. He drove in Ortiz twice. He did it on that at-bat, and then he did it with a triple in the 6th inning. Again, you can see that he's still not moving great. That took him longer to get first to third than I think we're used to seeing, but did put some better swings on the ball. Pat Murphy made sure to call that out multiple times in post-game, even though that wasn't really the burning question on a lot of people's minds. It was Joey Ortiz, who, to put it simply, has been on fire this month. He's been on fire since Cooper Pratt's promotion. He has also been on fire since the return of Bryce Wilson to the Milwaukee Brewers. If you remember, Bryce Wilson called him a generational player during his May of 2024. We did look up the numbers. Joey Ortiz has been a pretty good baseball player when Bryce Wilson has been on the Milwaukee Brewers. When Bryce Wilson has not been a Milwaukee Brewer, Joey Ortiz has been one of, if not the worst qualified hitters in baseball. So Bryce Wilson effect. Bryce Wilson's immediate perception of Joey Ortiz has to remain generational player, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think at this point, you just need, it's clear that he needs a swingman who believes in him on the roster, and then he can just take off. He can just mash. Like, it's been, all jokes aside, like, it has been awesome to see him doing this, obviously for the Brewers. But given everything he's been through, and I know Murph highlighted this too, just it's hard to deal with that much failure at the plate, that many struggles. You hear the noise, no matter how much you try and avoid it. Like, you're taking over for Willy Adames, who the fans absolutely loved, a guy who a lot of people did not want to see go, even though I think everyone at this point would acknowledge that the Brewers absolutely made the correct choice in letting him go for the money that he got. That's a tough place to be in as a player, and to struggle as bad as he did, and to know that then at the beginning of this season, they signed Cooper Pratt to an extension. He's in AAA. He's ready for the big leagues any moment now. Like, you know, that guy is taking your job soon. And the fact that he really never had an attitude issue. He got called out by Pat Murphy last year for having bad at-bats and doing things. Like, he just never had any sort of bad attitude. He never took any of it into the field because he continued to play really solid defense. And then the move to third base has unlocked even better defense, like really, really good defense since he moved back to third base. You just got to give the guy a ton of credit. And it's one of those, you feel really good for him. And I'm sure he's probably felt like he's got a big monkey off the back type of situation here, where it just relaxed now and things are a little bit more calm. Whether that was just moving back to third base where he knew he had success, and maybe that just gave him that vote of confidence, like, hey, I know I can succeed when I'm playing third base. And as dumb as that sounds, it can go a long way. Confidence can go a really long way. So I don't know exactly what caused it. We can talk about the fact that he's added 4 miles per hour of bat speed since he moved to third base, which has no correlation with moving positions, I can't imagine. But it certainly has correlation with him performing well, because the last time we saw him at this level of bat speed was that May, June time in 2024 when he was really hitting well. I don't think that's a coincidence at all, but it's been awesome to see. I'm very happy for him. If he's playing like this at third base, quite frankly, there is no need to go upgrade hit that spot, and there will not be an option that's better than this version of Joey Ortiz. And I'm not even talking about like the 1,000 OPS the last couple of weeks or whatever, but even just since Cooper Pratt came over, like even if he's close to a league average hitter and he is adding a little bit of pop and playing really, really good defense at third base, you're not finding an upgrade in the market this year that's going to be available to that level of Joey Ortiz. So it'd be really, really big if he can continue to do it. And the Brewers have always showed a lot of belief in Joey Ortiz. So I would imagine they're believing what's happening right now. And I'm guessing they feel pretty good about the left side of the infield all of a sudden, which we haven't talked about Pratt much, but he's just been solid. He's still hitting at a better clip than I expected him to early on right now. Like it's been a solid offensive clip. It's not great, but the defense has been very good, and there's just a lot of good stuff coming from that side of the infield, and especially as the 8-9 hitters, like it's pretty hard to complain about that spot at this point.
I feel like the bat speed thing is probably the biggest piece of evidence that just points to the confidence, because you don't get strong enough in season to just gain the ability to swing the bat on average 4 miles an hour harder. This is literally it's literally just he's letting it rip now, and that only comes from feeling like you can let it rip.
Yeah.
So that's just you're seeing the ball better, and you feel like you can take some bigger cuts at it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that makes the most sense. Also, just convicted in what you're seeing, like trusting the pitches that you're seeing, like, okay, reading a curveball early and knowing that I can get my A swing off on it, instead of I'm kind of feeling for pitches. I'm kind of feeling for, I don't really trust what I'm seeing here. I'm just kind of try and get the bat on the ball, get it in play, move a runner. That felt like what the offensive approach was for the beginning part of the season. Now it feels like, okay, I'm seeing the ball. I know I can do some damage here, and I'm going to let everything rip because I'm trusting what I'm seeing too. So yeah, I think that's definitely a big part of it.
Let's move on to some listener questions for a few minutes here. Trade deadline is approaching, so we'll start with a couple of trade-related questions. First question that we got on Twitter. Thoughts on trading Mason Miller and converting him to a starter next year? So I don't know about converting him to a starter. I don't think that's going to work too well if teams try to do that, although there have been some success stories. My hot take, though, is I think it makes more sense for the Brewers to trade for Mason Miller than Tarek Skubal. Maybe that's not that hot of a take because it's mainly just the years of control thing, but that is my take.
Yeah,
not saying they necessarily should do it, but if I'm picking one or the other,
I would agree, especially because I don't necessarily think the cost. I mean, he would cost more than Skubal would for a rental, but I don't think the difference in cost would be big enough to make up for the fact that you would get 3.5 years, I believe, right? 3 years after this for Miller. To me, though, the interesting part is the converting him to a starter, because to me, that would be the only way I would actually feel good, I think, about giving up what I think it would require to get him. And it was thrown around that the Padres might try it. Obviously, he was a starter when he first initially broke through into the majors. The fact that the Brewers were able to get Miz to where they got him does at least give me the thought that maybe they could be a team that could give it a shot and see what they can do. And in worst case is he falls back into an absolutely elite closer, and you have that, so that is at least a nice floor to have. But I think that would be the point where I would actually be comfortable giving up what I think it would cost, is like you have your elite closer for 2026, and then you're going to try and make him a starter after that. And there'd be risk. I don't really know necessarily that I believe it would work, but I also am not a huge fan of paying money for relievers, nor am I a huge fan of paying a ton of prospect capital for relievers. So for me, it would be hard to, no matter how good he is, in one inning stints, it would just be hard for me to rationalize giving up as much as I think he's going to cost to do it. So the one way I could is if I thought starting was a real possibility, and I have no idea if the Brewers would or not, but it was thrown around that the Padres might try it when they got him. When you give up Leo DeVries to get a reliever, like, again, that's where people start to go, okay, well, if you're going to do that, are you going to get more than 60 innings out of him? Because that's probably what they're going to be elite. They're going to be dominant innings. But is that really worth what you're giving up? And that would be my question here. But yeah, I mean, he'd certainly be awesome. If you had him on your team, you definitely would love to have him on your team. I just don't know about the cost and the opportunity cost of paying as much as it will be for a reliever. But I do agree. Between him and Skubal, I would pick him.
Sprawl 135 asks thoughts on trading Andrew Vaughn or Sal Frelick in an MLB for MLB deal to add pitching. So we talked about it a little bit with Sal. I would do it like in a heartbeat.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that you can do it now, though, because nobody knows what the outlook of this shoulder injury is. So I think that's kind of off the table at this point. We had talked before, like maybe Mariners are a good fit for maybe more Garrett Mitchell than Sal Frelick, but kind of that deal of they have a starting pitching surplus. Brewers have a pretty good outfield right now. But again, I think if Sal is on the shelf, that's not really a possibility anymore. Vaughn, I would consider, but I think to make that work, it would have to be one of, for it to be a Vaughn for pitching deal, there would need to be another move lined up where you get a little bit of righty power. Or it would have to be a move where you're moving Vaughn and you are getting some kind of righty power back, but that doesn't really make sense because why would teams do an MLB for MLB deal like that? So it pretty much just has to be one of multiple moves, and I don't know that you can operate like that at the trade deadline where things happen so quickly and fall apart so quickly. There's still the rumblings that you hear about. Well, the Brewers had more lined up in 22 when they did the Hader deal and it fell through, and which kind of would make sense given how those moves all played out and how it felt incomplete. That if that is the case, that's kind of the case study in what not to do, because if they did have more lined up and it fell apart and it basically not only ruined their entire deadline strategy, but also tanked their playoff hopes that year. It's a pretty big gamble you're taking there on something that's just not that sure of a thing. So
yeah, I'm with you on that. It does. Vaughn is an interesting one. Like, I could see there being a fit with somebody who wants a guy like him, and there could be pitching coming back the Brewers' way. Like, I could see that making sense, but not that Vaughn's really had much power. Although out of the break here, it seems like maybe a little bit more is back. He hit a home run, and he also hit a ball off the top of the wall and right. And maybe we're starting to see him get a little further removed from the hamate, get a little bit more healing through it. And I haven't looked if the bat speeds up since the break, but that was obviously something that was noticed when he first came back, was that it was down. So if they don't believe there's a ton of power in there for him the rest of the season, I could see them being a little bit more interested in it and thinking that he's still a good hitter in a lot of ways right now. Like, he's still been a good hitter this year, but it hasn't been via power as much. So maybe they'd think that they could replace it a little bit more, but the best version of Vaughn is going to give you a lot more power than we saw in the first half. So that's, I'm sure, what they would be banking on more than anything else. It just is hard for me to see it lining up. And yeah, with Frelick, it would have been a pretty interesting idea. I just don't think anyone's trading for him with the shoulder being as up in the air as it is. But we didn't really get any other. We kind of got a prospecty deadline question, but I will say it is interesting that not only is like Jeff Passan saying he expects the Brewers to be aggressive, not like they should be. Normally that's the wording, right? Around this time from national people is like the Brewers should be the aggressive team. They should be aggressive. Most of the time we're all like, well, that's not how they operate. Like, that's not what they do. Maybe you believe that's what they should do. In most cases, I don't think it is what they should do, to be honest with you. But it's interesting that he said they will be in the answer, the question about like who will be aggressive. And then Adam McCalvey going out and writing about it and saying it on air, like we don't normally hear it from people who are connected to the Brewers specifically as like a team, as something they expect them to be aggressive. Despite all of that, I still have a hard time believing they're going to really go into like the big names like the Tarek Skubals and the Mason Millers. And I'm sure they'll check in. They will check in because if they feel like they can get a steal for them, why not? Like, of course, if they don't think the value is that much, like, yeah, they'll take them. But it does make me wonder if there might be more action than we are used to at the deadline here. Like, there might be more deals, maybe not huge ones, but maybe the middle tier ones, but more than we're used to the last few years. Maybe not the Brandon Lockridge type deals, but more in like that middle tier where we talked about, like Trevor Rogers, maybe someone like that. Some of those types of pitchers. This is more noise and smoke than I'm used to hearing connected to the Brewers, and from very reputable sources too. Like not from just random thoughts that people have, like, oh, they should go get Tarek Skubal. Like that doesn't sound like what this is to me. It does sound like they're legitimately engaged on a lot of things, and that's interesting. We'll see how it plays out. It just, my feeling is that I don't think they get a huge name, but I have a feeling they get, like, if I were projecting, I think they get 2 or 3 names that people are pretty familiar with at this deadline, like more than what you're used to seeing. And it just is, that's the way it's kind of playing out to me. And the fact that they need legit rotation help after the Woodruff injury, and Harrison's kind of questionable, even though things are checking out pretty well for him. It feels like they're going to be a bit more aggressive. I'm getting that sense, and it might be a little bit more exciting deadline than Brewer fans have become accustomed to, especially since the most recent exciting deadline did involve the Josh Hader trade that you mentioned. Like that's the most exciting, and that was not exciting in a positive way for most fans. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see it play out, but that's just kind of how I'm reading it right now, because it's different than what the noise usually is, I feel like.
Milwaukee Beers on the Brewer Fanatic forums asked, leaving out untouchables and obvious prospects / big league talent, were some lower tier or under the radar prospects you would hate to see packaged away in a deadline deal? I will let our resident prospect expert handle this one first.
Yeah, so the first one we kind of answered, or the second one, I should say, we kind of answered with, who would we be willing to part with in the right scenario, including guys on the major league roster currently, last week. So I'll touch on the first one, though, and that was lower tier, under the radar prospects. So for me, no DSL player is untouchable, but this is a very, very interesting group of DSL players that I think have some pretty high ceilings. Ricky Monies is putting up by far the best batted ball data in the DSL this year. It's not even close. He's got max exit velocities over 111 as a 17-year-old. He has a ton of air pull. He has a ton of hard hit rate, over 50% hard hit. I've got all the numbers here. Why am I not just reading them? He's got a 106.3, 90th percentile exit velocity. So, like, that's a guy I would have a really hard time giving up, especially because he's only striking out 16% of the time. So, like, the strikeouts are reasonable. The power is legit. That's a guy, like, if you're throwing him in as even a somewhat main piece in a not huge deal, that would be a tough one. The other names, I won't go as in depth on them, but Leanders Matos he's been fantastic production wise. He reminds me of like Luis Pena, but he actually has a little bit better exit velocity stuff than Pena did. He's not quite as fast, but he is still stealing like close to 20 bases this year. And then Moises Salazar, catcher in the DSL, like one of the best defenders I've seen. And by the end of July here, he's at a 123 WRC plus two as a switch hitting 16-year-old catcher. So, like, those are guys that would be really hard for me to see them give up. To throw out a couple other names, some of the younger pitching, I think, would be another area where they don't quite have the same depth in as they do in other areas. So it'd be hard to see them give up like Ethan Dorches, Jaden Dubanowitz, two guys who have kind of, their stuff is ticked up this year. They're not having insanely good seasons, but both of them are suddenly touching upper 90s as 19 and 20-year-olds who are still very projectable and have deep pitch mixes. There are both 4 or 5 pitch mix guys. Like, those are the types that if they were a third piece in a trade or something, I think a lot of people would kind of go, oh, okay, yeah, whatever. But I think that would be losing some pretty high upside in the system. But they're all guys that in the right deal, I could be fine moving. It'd just be, yeah, I mean, hate to be seeing them packaged in a way that isn't legit value, like as throw-in type players. That's where it would be tough for me to see them go.
For the second part of the question, who outside of the obvious would you be willing to part with in the right scenario? I don't know. Is Andrew Fisher an obvious one?
No, I don't think so. We talked
Okay.
about him a little bit last week for this same type of question, but I do think, not to get on a tangent about it, but like Fangraphs put out their top 100 today. He was not on it. Brewer fans are really upset about it. I agree with the national people on this. Like, nobody's putting him in their top 100. Everyone in Brewers fandom thinks that's insane. I found out today that his zone contact rate is 71%. The lowest in MLB right now of qualified hitters is 76. Like, that's a legit concern. If somebody sees him as a very big piece in a trade, I think you have to capitalize on that value while he's doing what he's doing. And it could work out. Don't get me, like, there is a very legitimately high ceiling with like 40 homer power in there. And it would suck if he hits that ceiling somewhere else. But I don't think it would be unreasonable for the Brewers to be trying to capitalize on what he's doing right now before I think there's a very real world where the wheels still fall off and he's a quad A player in a year and a half. And that's like, that'd probably be too quick to declare him that, but you get what I'm saying. Like, I think it could fall off pretty quickly, and that could be where you're at. And I would not blame them for capitalizing on it right now.
At Older Potato on Twitter asks, is Churio's defense just not very good? I was slightly disappointed when it seemed Milwaukee had given up on him in center, but now I'm just expecting average fielding and average to below average arm for left field. His bat will carry, but is there still not the upside of defensive value? So I still cannot shake my belief that there's a way better defender in there than what we've seen so far. And he, like, in the corners, he's generally been pretty solid. I haven't checked recently on what the numbers are this year, but I've just seen enough flashes of not only solid athleticism, but actually an ability to get pretty good reads too, on top of the athleticism and the ability to take pretty good routes. It hasn't been like crazy consistent, but I've seen it enough that and that's why I was so adamant on wanting them to give him a little more leash in center field, which they ultimately did not. And Garrett Mitchell playing the way he's playing made that decision a lot more cut and dry for them. That's a big part of it as well. But so much of it to me just seems to come down to like the execution and just not trusting his instincts, really, like not seeming to trust it. Like the plays at the wall, he had one this week again where it was not, I'm not gonna say an easy play, but it was close to the wall, and more than anything, like not even just ignoring the outcome of the play, like he did not approach the wall well again. Like just did not seem to know where he was, and like just seems like he doesn't trust his surroundings on that play. So like those are and usually when he messes up on a play too, it's like he came crashing in on the ball and then slammed on the brakes, or he just did not seem to trust his read, did not seem to trust that he could get there or how he could get there. To me, it's almost kind of similar to what we've seen with the swing decisions, where it's like, he has the ability to be better than this, and you're just kind of like, why is it not improving with reps? And there has been a stretch where the swing decisions got a little better this year. They haven't been great over the last couple weeks again. But to me, the defense is kind of in that same boat of like, it's in there. And I am having a hard time understanding why with more reps, it just doesn't seem to be like he can't seem to get past that. And he is very young. I understand it, but it just falls into that boat for me of like, why is it not like it's been more than enough time. Like it should be trending in a positive direction instead of like he's just been the same player all 3 years that he's been in the big leagues.
Yeah, he graded out really well in right field his rookie season. Like that was I think it was 9 outs above average or maybe it was 9
Mhm.
DRS. Like he was graded out extremely well in right. It hasn't ever really come around great in left field, so I don't know if there's a connection there. Maybe he was just more comfortable there. I mean, I do know at AmFam specifically, left field is a difficult place to play, but this has been carried over to the road and stuff too. This is not just an AmFam issue. Um, yeah, the approach to the wall, he gets very choppy. He doesn't seem to know, like you said, where he is at any like again, he hit the padding of the wall when he went up for the one this week. That ball ended up hitting above the fence on that back wall, so I don't think he had any real shot at it again, but that like now we're talking like 5 times this year he's gotten caught on the wall when trying to jump. Like we got to figure that out at some point here. Um he feels it feels like he's just domed up in general right now, like he's just struggling to trust what he's seeing defensively, offensively. Like you said, the swing decisions have kind of come back down from his hot stretch. The swing decisions were very good, and now that he's struggling again, the swing decisions have not been very good. It feels like he doesn't have quite the confidence that you would hope to see from a guy who's now in his 3rd season. Like that's the part where you can understand that less and less every year for a guy like him. Um, and he's still got, an 810 OPS and he's been a well above average hitter this year. Like he's 22 years old. He's got 2 seasons under his belt of 2020 seasons and like 3 WAR. Like we're nitpicking a guy who's a college senior in terms of age, basically. But it is still a case where he's getting enough experience now where you would like to see some of these things just get cleaned up, and they're not quite getting there. I still believe he's going to be not just I think he can be a really good defender, and I think he's going to be eventually, but it's just not coming together as quick as I think he would like, as the Brewers would like, and it's still been fine. I think this year it's at 1 across the board. It's like 1 fielding run value, 1 outs above,
Mhm.
1 out above average, 1 DRS. Like I think that's, and it's not a huge sample with him missing a good chunk of the beginning of the season, but like he's been a fine defender. We're not talking about a guy who's been struggling in the outfield, but it does feel like there's more that could be in there that he's just not quite tapping into, and it feels the same at the plate too. I think that's kind of just the overall view of what he's done so far this year.
Final big league question we'll take this week. Have you guys noticed an uptick, not improvement, in challenges by the Brewers batters? This listener says he commented on it back on Gasser's start. Seems to him that there may have been some conversations had. So, unfortunately, Baseball Savant does not let you filter ABS usage by date, which I don't understand. I have a love-hate relationship with Savant because the data there is like a gold mine. It's like the go-to source for all this data you need, but I think they tend to actually be behind the times on when they're rolling out certain features and doing different things, and then they kinda act like they're the industry standard for this stuff when in reality, like, the player comparison tool, like TJ Stats had that for several months already. Um, I said this to you before we started recording, like, when induced vertical break had become, like, the way to look at this stuff, Savant was still doing their thing where it was inches of movement with gravity, and it's this pitch has X amount of drop compared to the same pitch type thrown at a similar velocity with similar extension. Like you're behind the 8 ball on that one, like,
Yeah.
but I digress. The point is they don't let you sort that stuff by date, so I can't tell you what the numbers have been since that start specifically, since that date. You can group it by month though, and the Brewers challenge rate in July compared to their expected challenge rate, so the number of challenges you would expect them to make based on how often the league challenges the same kind of pitches that the Brewers have seen as hitters. That rate versus expected is just as low in July as it was in June, and it's worse than it was in April and May. So the quick answer, as best as we can find it, they are still not challenging enough or successfully enough. It was during this week that Jackson Churio had his moment in the ninth inning where it was that comeback breaking ball from Pete Fairbanks, and It was a ball, but not only was it a ball, just generally you have both of your challenges left. It is the ninth inning. There are 2 outs. You get extra challenges in extra innings. Like even if that is a strike, that should be an auto challenge, and he didn't use it. And then he came up the next day and he challenged a very similar pitch, except it was in the first inning with nobody out, and it was a strike. So clearly, like, I don't know. Clearly, there was a conversation had, and it did not get through to him in the right way because he went up the next day and could not discern the difference in the situations, and just his thoughts seemed to be, I just need to always challenge that pitch. So, for whatever reason, they are not getting better at this.
Yeah, I think maybe some recency bias because Andy Fletcher was just terrific behind the plate a couple days ago. May be playing a role in the memory here because there were a lot of challenges in that game and a lot of correct challenges for the Brewers. It did feel like after the Churio incident that guys were a little more aggressive. I was wondering myself if there may have been a conversation had in the clubhouse, like, guys, I know we've told you to be smart about this, but maybe we need to be a little bit more willing to use them. And then maybe to Gary Sanchez, he was pulled into a different room and said, don't listen to what we just said. Don't use more than you've already been using. Maybe we lessen them on your side. But yeah, it still just feels like I've said it before, and I'll keep saying it. I just can't believe the Brewers are this bad at it. I just assumed this would be something that they were very good at, and they are the complete opposite. Like, it's just, they have not been good at it. And it's hard for me to fathom that being the case. It just doesn't make any sense. It's hard for me to even compute it in my head. Like, I don't get it. It seems like they should be way better at this. And as a team that does everything, all the little things pretty well, it just felt like a shoe-in to me.
With that, let's go to the minor league sandbox.
All right, let's do it. We got some questions this week. So, well, we got them all from Older Potato. So thank you, Older Potato. His first one is, how much value is there in immediately slotting draft picks into the farm system rankings? Part of me wishes we waited a year before ranking anyone, or at least until we see some professional innings or at bats. So I can understand where you're coming from on that. To me, these are all imperfect sciences. They're just rankings that people put together based on personal preference, personal opinion, what you value versus what other people value, what you see as a scout when you watch video versus what other people see. Like, it's not a perfect science no matter what. So we see significant changes, like Alexander Frias was not on top 30s for the Brewers. He was almost top 30 in Fangraph's top 100 for the entire league today. That came out. He was 42. So he went from outside of the Brewers' top 30 before the season to almost top 30 in baseball. And it's only been 4 months. I think it just doesn't really matter, I guess, is how I would say it. As long as the people who are ranking them have looked into them, have scouted these high school or college guys coming into the draft and coming out of the draft on a team, and they have legitimate opinions that they formed based on that, like, I think you can pretty safely slot them in, and then they're going to get adjusted after they play either way. Like I said, I understand what you're saying. I don't think it matters too much, and I don't think it's that much different than slotting a 17-year-old DSL player that we saw play 60 games in the Dominican Summer League. Like, in fact, you probably have more knowledge of a lot of the high school and college guys. So I don't know. That's how I would view it. I think it's a reasonable thought, but to me, it's just not much different than any other person getting ranked. He also asked, after the draft, what do you see as the biggest strengths of the system and what are the biggest weaknesses? He said, I think there are a sneaky number of graduations coming up that could change the perception of the total system. So, yeah, I mean, Henderson's already graduated. Yoho's already graduated. Lara and Pratt will be relatively soon. Pratt will be in like a week, I believe. Lara will probably be in about a month if he remains on the team the whole time. I think there are some, but I don't think it's going to affect too many rankings. But in terms of the strengths, like, I would still say it's depth, despite some of those graduations. Like, especially on the position player side of things, I think you can pretty much go 2 or more deep at every single position on the diamond. And they can be legitimate top 30 level players that you can slot in and feel comfortable with, like Dingus and Cairo at catcher, Adams and Burke at first, Fisher and Madej or Pena at third, Madej, Pena, Pratt, Monies, Frontado, middle infield guys. You've got Payne and Adam Shevsky and now Strohsnyder and the Ebles in the middle infield I didn't even mention. And I think they just have an insane amount of depth, and that is going to remain after this draft and after the people graduate. The weakness is the pitching, though I think it's better than other people do. Like I mentioned, guys like Ethan Dorches and Jaden Dubanowitz have taken steps this year, even though the stats don't say it. I still think Bishop Letson has a crazy high ceiling. Tyson Harden was a top 100 prospect for Fangraphs in their latest update. They love Josh Noth over there as well. He got bumped up to a 45-plus future value guy, a top 10 guy in the system. I understand, like, some of the concerns people have with the pitching, and it's not at the level that it was a few years ago, but that's because Jacob Mizorowski is dominating in the big leagues. Logan Henderson, when he's healthy, dominating in the big leagues. You've got guys like Drowan and Sproat who graduated this year. You've got Robert Gasser, who just graduated, despite coming up originally 2 years ago after his Tommy John and everything. I think they're in a similar spot to when they were when all those guys were in the lower levels. But you've got a Harden. I like Tate Keener. There's still interesting depth, but I think if you had to pick a weakness, it would still be pitching. Like, I think that is what you would have to look at, but I'm not as worried about it as other people are. And his final question was, how has Jefferson Cairo been looking in AAA? From his raw stats, the bat seems good, but a 16% caught stealing rate doesn't look so good. Are there concerns here, or are the steals more due to pitchers not holding runners? So, yeah, not only are the raw stats solid offensively, he's actually been pretty unlucky this year. There's been a lot of rough luck in the batted ball data. His xWOBA is a decent amount higher than his actual weighted on base average. He's hitting the ball hard. He's cut down the whiffs significantly as the season has gone on. The thing is, he has not caught in almost a month. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it was a built-in, like, we're going to be smart about the arm. I don't know. He's playing. He's DHing basically every day, but he hasn't caught since, I believe, the 26th of June. So that's making it really hard to say what's going on with the throwing and everything else. Every time I've gotten pop times on him, they've been more than reasonable. I'm not really sure why so many people have been able to steal on him. The accuracy has still looked fine when I watch for the most part. Not as accurate as it used to be, but enough to get out. So I'm not super worried about the arm. I am a little concerned as to why he hasn't caught in almost a month, and if that is connected to the arm, because that would be an issue. Last I heard, it was supposed to be soon that he's back behind the plate, so I'm hoping that'll be the case for him. Same for Marco Dingus. It sounds like hopefully soon for him, because he's also been unable to catch for like a month and a half. So the two top catching prospects both having a long stretch here without being able to catch is definitely not super ideal, but I can't give a great answer on Cairo right now because of that. So we will move into the batters. I pretty much, because I haven't done them in a while, sandbox in a while, I just went through guys who are having good Julys, and I'll start in the DSL. There are 5 names. I already mentioned a couple of them. Osiris Ramirez, another decently high bonus guy this year. In July, he has a 1254 OPS. He has 3 doubles, a triple, and 2 homers. He has pretty big raw power. On the season, he's got 6 homers. He's got a 130 WRC plus, 952 OPS. Strikeout rate is reasonable at 20% with a 16% walk rate. Interesting bat, not the greatest athlete, but handling third base and second base pretty decently from what I've heard. Leanders Matos, I already kind of mentioned him. In July, he has an 1164 OPS, 2 doubles, 4 homers. Coming into today, he had a 1082 OPS, but he went 3 for 3 with 2 walks, so I think he's up to like 1150 something, which means he has about a 160 WRC plus with 9 homers, 2 triples, 8 doubles. He looks like the steal in this class, and he's getting some legit attention as a real prospect here. The exit velocities aren't crazy, but they are well above average for his age. I'll talk about Ricky Monies in a second. I already kind of mentioned him, but he's got the crazy exit velos, but Matos has the production and solid enough batted ball data and really good contact data too. He's pretty interesting. They may have gotten a steal here, so that'll be one to watch. Moises Salazar, I mentioned him, switch hitting 16-year-old catcher with a cannon of an arm. Looked really good defensively on video from what I have seen. In his July, he had a 997 OPS with 2 doubles, 2 homers. On the season, he's up to a 123 WRC plus with 5 doubles, 3 homers. Again, just the age, the switch hitting, the fact that he looks really good defensively and he's hitting, like, I think they may have gotten one here. Another one, Ricky Monies, I mentioned earlier, he in July has a 976 OPS, 5 doubles, a homer. On the season, he has 10 doubles, 3 triples, and 4 homers. He's up to a 124 WRC plus despite a really slow start. That has turned around in a major way. And he had pretty bad luck to start the year from what I've heard. So not shocking that with that type of 111 EVs, 106.3 90th percentile exit velocity, and then a 51% hard hit rate that he is finding a lot more success now. The final one I'll talk about, I don't think I brought up much. Enrique Lovera, I think I talked about him when he signed. But in July, he's got an 899 OPS, 7 doubles, a triple, and 2 homers. It was a rough start for him, too. So he's only at a 109 WRC plus for the season now, but 13 doubles, 3 triples, 3 homers. Really nice looking swing. JJ Cooper, I believe. No, Josh Norris, I believe, posted video from the open face view of his swing on a homer that he hit while he was down in the Dominican watching him face the Tampa Bay Rays DSL team. So another interesting guy from this class. There are, I believe, still 9 players who signed who are 17 or younger and have a WRC plus over 100 in this class. It has been a very, very successful first year for the 2026 international signing class. Moving to some other non-DSL players, Rylan Mills, I've talked about before, catcher, late round pick last year, teenage guy still. He's up to a 119 WRC plus in low A now because he has a 1261 OPS in July with a couple homers, a triple, a double, striking out only 10 times, 11 walks in that time. So really nice to see from him after a bit of a slow start in low A. Daniel Dickinson, I've been pretty hard on him when I've talked about him, but he is now up to a 106 WRC plus on the season. It's carried by a 20% walk rate, so that is probably not sustainable, but he's got a 1062 OPS in July, and he's hit 4 of his 5 homers in the month of July. So starting to tap into some power, which would be a big, big thing for him. Blake Burke, he's had a very good July, a 1044 OPS, 3 homers, 6 doubles. He is now at a 2020 season. He moves very well for his size. He's got 21 homers and 23 steals, a 129 WRC plus. It's impressive. He should probably be in AAA soon at this point. Josh Adamszewski just keeps raking. He is up to a 157 WRC plus in AA, 161 overall. He's had a really good July, 1016 OPS with 3 homers, a triple, 5 doubles, even strikeouts to walks, 11-11. He just keeps hitting, man. Outside of Madej, I think that he has the highest offensive ceiling, well-rounded offensive ceiling. I think he's going to hit for power. I think he's going to have a good hit tool. He's not going to strike out much. He's going to take walks. I am a very, very big Adamszewski fan, as I have been for a long time, but it's really getting to the point now where you just can't deny that this kid hits at a level that very few do. Luke Adams still just kind of crushing the ball in AAA. He's got a 997 OPS in July. He's got a 150 WRC plus for the season with 12 homers at the level. It's a weird profile, but he has done it at every single level. And at some point, it just gets hard to believe that it won't continue. Not saying he'll be a 150 WRC plus guy in the big leagues, but it's looking more and more like he can be a big league hitter. Brady Ebel, I mentioned a little bit earlier. He has a 121 WRC plus now for the season with 8 homers, 27 steals. Fangraphs put him at 63 in their top 100 today, so he's getting some legit public attention now. He has a 984 OPS in July with 3 homers. He homered in his first 2 at-bats after the Brewers drafted Trey Ebel, his brother, so trying to set the table for him, make sure he knows that he's still the older brother and a pretty talented guy himself. Josiah Ragsdale, he's got a 166 WRC plus in AA. He's 29 of 31 on steals for the season. He's up to 11 homers now. He's hit 4 in AA. The next guy I'm going to talk about is probably the breakout prospect for most people, but Ragsdale is the breakout guy in the system for me this year. It's been impressive. I really did not see this coming at all. Alexander Frias, I was very high on coming into the year, and I think I was a lot higher than consensus on him. I still wasn't as high as, again, Fangraphs put him 42 in their top 100 right now, but it was a slow start in low A, but he had a really strong July. He's up to a 98 WRC plus as an 18-year-old, and it's been an 806 OPS in July with 2 homers, 4 doubles. Again, the strikeouts it's only been 10 strikeouts in 58 plate appearances, so he's limiting the strikeouts well. He looks the part. He definitely looks the part, and he plays with some swag too. He's got some good pimp jobs on the homers that he's hit, so he's very, very fun. Moving to the pitching side, I'll run through a couple DSL guys who did really well in July. Derlene Garcia, I've talked about a couple times already. He's a low 90s fastball, big curveball. He's got a slider, and then a rare changeup as well. He had 15 innings, only 3 earned runs, 13 strikeouts to only 2 walks, so really good ratio there. Raymond Sarmiento, he has a really, really good changeup from the video I've seen. He's been solid all season, but a really good July. 14 scoreless innings, 15 strikeouts to 3 walks. Luis Aguayo, I've talked about, coming off Tommy John. Not a ton of strikeouts, only 7 in 12 innings, but he's only given up 2 earned runs. He's only walked 2. I really like his stuff. Coming off Tommy John, it's good to see. And the final one is Jesus Vasquez. I can't find anything on his stuff, but he's had a really good July. Scoreless in 12 innings, 12 strikeouts to 4 walks. In June, he walked 14 people and only struck out 5. And in July, he struck out 12 to only 4 walks. So that's a really good step forward for a guy who's in his first professional season. So some ups and downs aren't to be unexpected. But really nice to see a bounce back after what was clearly a pretty tough June for him. Moving to the full season side of things, we've got pretty much just 5 relievers. I'll start with Yorman Galindez, who's had a interesting role for Biloxi this month. He's kind of started, but also been short starts, like 2 innings. He also came out of the pen 1 time, but he hasn't given up an earned run in his 6 2/3, struck out 8 during that time. He's into the upper 90s in these shorter stints, touching 98, I think even 99 once. I really like this stuff. I think it's good breaking stuff. I think he's got the velo. The command has been all over the place this year in his return from Tommy John, but he's very interesting to me. Peyton Nix, I've talked about him a couple times. He just keeps shoving out of the bullpen for the Timber Rattlers. He's down to a 2.20 ERA on the season between low A and high A. 41 innings, 41 strikeouts, only 9 walks. He's a non-drafted free agent signed by Ginger Polson. It's a fun 5-pitch mix. It's not a ton of velo, but it is a ton of movement in a bunch of different directions. And then 3 AAA relievers I'm going to talk about who I think could be legit options for the Brewers. So Cameron Wagoner, I've talked about. He got the call to AAA. We're getting some StatCast data on him. It's pretty interesting. The vertical approach angle is hovering around -4.2. He's throwing 97 on average. He's been up to 98.8. And he's commanding it really well, throwing it at the top of the zone, throwing it where you'd want that pitch to be. And then he's got the cutter and the slider. Both are grading out really well on stuff models. He's spinning them around 2,800 RPMs, throwing the cutter in the upper 80s, the slider more in the mid 80s. It's not a huge difference in shape, so I don't know if they may just have him throw one or the other. But he looks like a big league arm. He looks like a guy who could help the bullpen this year, and I hope he gets the chance to. Blake Holub is the other one. He's interesting. He's really tightened up the pitch shapes this year. He's had a very good July. He is throwing a four seam and a cut fastball now, which he used to be just the cutter type pitch. I don't think either are the greatest shapes, although I find the cut fastball to be fascinating because it's like 16 inches of carry, and then it's got -1 horizontal on average. So like that's a weird pitch. That's not one you see very often. It gets a decent amount of swing and miss on it. The slider's nasty. It has a 41% whiff rate against it in July. He's striking out 47% of batters in July in his 8 innings with an 8% walk rate. The arm angle is about as high. TJ Stats had it at 88 degrees, so almost straight up. Pitch Profiler measures it differently. Somehow it's at 54, but TJ's usually lines up more with what Statcast has. So, and if you watch him, I mean, it is pure over the top. He gets his body turned very sideways, but the arm angle is very over the top. So he's an interesting one too. He's throwing the splitter a bit more now, which I've always hoped he would. He's commanding it better. And the final one is Mark Manfredi. I've talked about him a ton, but he's just having another really good month. He's thrown 8 innings. He's got a 34% strikeout rate. He's still getting a lot of whiff, 27% overall. Not a lot of hard contact against him. If they need a lefty, I could still see him being an option. So 3 guys that I think are legitimate bullpen options if needed. Obviously, the hope is to have more proven entities in the bullpen, but I think they have some options if they need them. So that's at least good to have in your back pocket. But yeah, I tried to make this a bit longer because we had gone almost a whole month without a minor league extra or minor league sandbox. But yeah, hopefully that was a decent rundown of what's been going on in July, because there's been a lot. There were a lot of hitters who had like 900 OPSs in July that I didn't include because that's just how good the system's been in this month. But yeah, that's all I got.
Could tell that was longer because I sat here in silence for a while.
Yeah, it was. I think we only went like 15 minutes, if I remember. It could have been closer to 20. I don't know.
That's going to do it for us on this week's edition of the Brewer Fanatic podcast. Per usual, we'll be back next Friday to break down all things big league and minor league relating to the Milwaukee Brewers. Until that show comes out, though, thank you for spending parts of your week with us and tuning in.